to Arizona, where we are looking ahead to Lori Vallow Daybell's upcoming trial for the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
Just earlier this month, a judge declared Vallow Daybell competent to stand trial, and a second judge granted her request to represent herself. You heard us right, to represent herself at her upcoming murder trial.
What is that going to be like? She's already serving a life sentence in Idaho for the murders of her two youngest children, Tylee and JJ, and her fifth husband's first wife. A lot of numbers in this case. Tammy Daybell was that victim there.
That's right, a lot of victims, crazy. Court TV anchor Ted Rollins does have a closer look at the charges against Lori Vallow in Arizona.
Her name is Lori. She's not aware of anything. Yeah, Tylee, the daughter, also doesn't know anything.
July 11th, 2019, 62-year-old Charles Vallow has just been shot in his estranged wife Lori's house. As first responders and EMTs tape off the crime scene and begin their investigation, Lori Vallow seems to be more concerned with what her neighbors think than the fact that her husband had been shot.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us there.
Gotcha.
Like, hi, neighbor, sorry.
Charles Vallow died at the scene. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, admitted that he was the shooter, but he claimed he was acting in self-defense.
I didn't see the shot, I heard it, and then I came back around and I saw that he was on the ground. Okay. And was freaking out.
Yeah. A couple of months later, Lori Vallow moved to Idaho with her kids, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. By December, she was married to her fifth husband, Chad Daybell, and both her children were missing. She was also ghosting Charles's sister and brother-in-law, who were JJ's biological grandparents.
If somebody 2 years ago would have said, this is what's going to happen with Lori, I would have never believed it.
After months of radio silence from Lori, Larry and Kay Woodcock announced a $20,000 reward for information about the kids.
These are beautiful young children. They're two extremely intelligent young children, and we want them back. We want them back in our family.
As police searched for Tylee and JJ, they discovered a disturbing trend of unusual and unexplained deaths or random shootings of people close to Lori and Chad. In mid-October, Chad's wife, Tammy, died unexpectedly at their home 2 weeks before Chad married Lori.
Hello, I'm Chad, the husband. She's clearly dead.
This was weeks after a masked man shot Tammy while she was in her driveway.
I didn't step out of the backseat of my car, and suddenly he was there, and he had a paintball gun, and he was and like he was going to shoot at me.
While in Arizona, investigators found out that the estranged husband of Lori's niece had also been shot at in his driveway back in October.
911, where's your emergency?
Someone just shot my window, and it hit my window, it shattered my driver's side window.
The shot missed Brandon Boudreaux's head by inches, and his private investigator said Brandon had a pretty good idea who was behind this attack.
He believes that Alex Cox was the person who fired that shot, and he knew that Alex Cox was kind of the family hitman.
Police were never able to question Alex Cox about Brandon or Tammy's shooting because he died as well in December of 2019.
911, where is your emergency?
I have a older male here named Alex. He just passed out here on my bathroom.
After Lori and Chad were arrested for the deaths of Tammy, Tylee, and JJ, she was indicted in Arizona for conspiring with Alex Cox to kill Charles Vallow and attempting to kill Brandon Boudreaux. She could be sentenced to 2 more life sentences in prison if she's convicted in Charles's and Brandon's cases.
And Julie, as we know, Lori's trial is set to begin earlier next year. And as we look ahead to that trial, we want to take a look back at the interview that police conducted of Vallow that took place right after the 2019 incident in which Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, shot and killed her then husband, Charles Vallow.
Now remember, this was just months before Tylee, who you will see in this interview, and her brother JJ would vanish. Let's go to the beginning of Lori Vallow's story to the Chandler Police Department, where she alleges her husband started threatening her via text messages when it came to custody over their adopted son, JJ.
I know this sounds silly, but it's probably the easiest way to start is just to tell me what happened. And then so you can start what makes the most sense to you, and we'll just work our way through, and I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions just to kind of clarify.
Sure.
So I know you talked to the initial patrol officer.
And he just got information. He didn't say anything.
So yeah, if you can just kind of tell me kind of what happened. It sounds like some of this may have started last night or something along those lines.
Right.
So start where you think it makes the most sense.
Okay, so,
I told you, it's a crazy question.
Well, so we moved into this house 3 weeks ago because he offered to get me a house here where all my family is. So we were in Houston. And so he's like, we had decided to separate or whatever. So he's like, well, I'll pay for a house for you and for JJ and whatever, because he's all about JJ. He's never about Tylee, but he's all about JJ. Because we adopted him together. He's his great nephew. We adopted him as a baby. And so we adopted him as a baby, and so we've been raising him together. And he travels all the time for business, so he's used to just going back and forth. So he's always gone like Monday through Friday. So he came when we first moved in and brought me stuff from Houston, like a U-Haul. And then he hasn't been back. But it's all these threats on my phone all the time, you know, like whatever, all these things. And then he told me...
What kind of threats?
Just... you'd have to read them to me, but he's always mad at me, right? And he doesn't want a divorce, but I don't like him and don't want to deal with him, so that's just how it is. Like, so we married for 14 years, we dealt with him for 14 years, of him being horrible to her. Like, he gets in huge fights with her, a lot of things. But anyway, so he said, I'm coming on Wednesday night, all of a sudden. I want to see JJ, and I told him, I said, I will never keep JJ from you. You can come see him whenever you want to, come take him to school, whatever. Like, I'm not going to do that.
So when you initially moved, he had said he was going to buy you a house. So you moved here with your...
Yeah, he was going to rent us a house.
And so you moved...
All my family lives here. So we lived here for a long time.
Okay.
And then he moved us to Houston.
Okay.
And we were there with my son. He was out of school. He didn't have any of his, like, services, his DDD, his anything. He, like, ripped him out of school and said, we're moving. Okay. And I didn't go with him at first. And he took him. And I let him take him, and I didn't file anything or whatever. And then he filed something against me and said, I'm only going to get supervised visits because I'm crazy and blah, 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 you know, the story. And so I just didn't talk to him for like 30 days and let him take care of him and let him see what I've been doing for the past 7 years, because men need to do that. You know, I have 5 kids. I have grown kids. I have grandkids. Like, okay, you're going to threaten me that you're not going to let me see my child without supervised visitation? Okay, do it for 30 days and see how long it lasts. You're begging me to come pick him up.
Yeah.
Which he did. She's like, come back, and whatever. So I moved in with them to Houston for the family, you know, and Tylee went with me. We drove to Houston from here and left all our family and all his support, all my son's support, like his cousins, everything. And we were there, and I enrolled him in school there. I tried to start all his services, and it takes forever.
Yeah.
You know, it takes so long to get that done.
There's no easy transferring.
There's no easy transferring.
You start from the beginning.
It's a totally new thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't do any of it in those 30 days. So he just had gone without services, without even applying. And I'm like, do you even realize? Because he didn't ever do it in the first place. I did it. Long story. I'll keep it short.
Vallow Daybell there in her own words. We didn't hear from her during her trial in Idaho because she didn't take the stand, but that could change now that she's going to be a pro se defendant. Let's bring in our guest now to discuss this. We have law enforcement and litigation expert Sonny Slaughter. Now, Sonny, I feel like that's really going to be the most fascinating thing about this upcoming Arizona trial, because she's already been convicted in Idaho, but what's going to be so different about Arizona? Pro se defendant. She's representing herself. So my first question, through the lens of her being that pro se defendant, what do you think, based on what we've seen so far in this police interview, we can expect from her demeanor in court? Will she have the appropriate demeanor for someone representing themselves?
Good morning, ladies. It's so great to see you both this morning. Happy New Year's Eve. Okay. Woo! Lori Vallow I think that she is going to come across in the same manner in which she did during the interview. She tends to giggle at the most inappropriate times, kind of very light and airy and matter of fact in how she feels about things. Well, I don't know if her demeanor will come off well with the jury because this is a very serious matter and she doesn't seem to take things very seriously. You know, hopefully she will not conjure up the gods, so to speak, because she's all religious, but I don't see her having the appropriate demeanor, and I just think she's not going to fare well doing pro se for herself.
I can't wait to see her represent herself in this case because I have to say, if you just look at this police interview in and of itself, prior to a conviction, accusations and conviction for the murders of her 2 children, I don't find, Sonny, that she's that not credible. I mean, yeah, she may giggle inappropriately and be flirtatious. My word, nobody else is with law enforcement. But I think if you just look at that video, she comes across as credible, but that changes once we know everything else she's now been convicted of.
Oh, I think she has a very manipulating way. I mean, she's had 5 husbands and she's been able to move around. So I will give you that. She does sound credible. But then when she starts to talk more, when she gets into it more, I just think that she kind of sounds very narcissistic and controlling if you think about it. But you're right. We do know more about Lori Vallow than most people do. So it'll be interesting to see what the jury comes away with and how she does represent herself.
Yeah, and talking about what this is going to look like in terms of litigation, we know all of the facts, but a lot of the public knows a lot of the facts in this case. Arizona was paying attention to this closely from the beginning because she's from Arizona. She only moved to Idaho to start the gathering of the 144,000, which is what Chad Daybell was starting there and wanted her to move. So it's been in the headlines in Arizona from the beginning. What do you do if you're a litigation expert representing and helping a team put together who they want on their jury and who they want to make sure is not on their jury? What stands out to you in a case like this where perhaps everyone at least knows the headline that she was already convicted?
That's a great question. I think jury selection is going to be tight and difficult in this particular case because so many people know a lot about her. I would suggest that they ask questions about how do people feel about someone that has already been convicted of a crime that might not be guilty of another crime that they've been charged with. I think people are going to need to be able to peel back the layers and focus only on this specific case. So they're going to have to ask people, can you focus on this case, this evidence, knowing what you already know? So they can be really specific because we're going to need you to focus only on this case, nothing else that you think about the person, because then that taints the jury and has a lot of biases in there.
So in looking at the case, one of the things that's also considered is the victim. And the victim in this case, Charles Vallow, was actually heard on body cam video and was, trying to help, trying to offer things to Lori Vallow. Let's listen to that together.
I tried to support her as much as I could, but it's gotten really, really bad. Lately, she's had a break. She says, I'm Nick Schneider. I've taken over Charles's body, and Charles has been killed. I'm going to kill you. You're going to be murdered today or tomorrow. I can do it. I'm back there with my priesthood, with my powers. She does priesthood blessing. She does.
So who's Nick Schneider? Okay.
That's who I'm supposed to be.
Sonny, so sad. The victim actually went to the police to try to get assistance, and Lori Vallow said to him, you're going to be murdered. And sure enough, he allegedly was murdered by her. Tell me what you think that means for her having a victim like this.
I think it's going to be difficult for her unless she can prove that she didn't have this conversation with him. I think that Charles Vallow was very credible, and I think he was dismissed, and I think a lot of that has to do with gender. Lori Daybell Vallow Daybell is, is Daybell Vallow is a very beautiful, charming woman. And when you have a man that comes up and says all of these things, he doesn't seem credible, even though we think Lori is credible. But I think it's going to be a really tough call when the victim itself is telling the police, this is what she said to me, I'm going to be murdered.
This is what's going to happen. It's a chilling prediction.
I agree.
Charles Vallow.
Prediction or premeditation?
Yeah, premeditation on Lori's part is what the jury is going to have to decide. But coming up, we're going to take a look back at the police interview, the videos of Lori Vallow Daybell as she continues telling police about the growing tension between her and her fourth husband, Charles Vallow.
How are we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
This was a real-life soap opera.
And I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
This year.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Let's turn now back to Arizona. We are looking ahead to Lori Vallow Daybell's upcoming murder trial. She is, of course, accused of murdering her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
So we are looking back together at the police interview videos of Vallow Daybell. She's telling police that there's this alleged tense relationship between her and her husband at the time, Charles, over their children, Tylee and JJ. Let's listen in.
He hasn't been here in a couple weeks since we moved in.
Okay.
He came, he was very nasty when he was there, but he travels for business. So he went back to the Houston house, and he's like, I'm coming on Wednesday night, and I'm gonna come pick up JJ and take him to school Thursday, pick him up Thursday, take him Friday, whatever. And I said, Casey wanted to come to the house, and I said, you can't come stay at this house because you can't get along with Tylee. She's a minor, she has to live here.
Yeah.
So Casey gets in huge fights with her.
Okay.
And she hates him. And so I'm like, you can't stay at the house, so I would book you a hotel because he stays in hotels all the time because he travels for business, and the business pays for it, right? So I said, I will book you a hotel nearby.
What does he do?
He works with teachers and their retirement plans, but he goes to them at their school. He mostly works in California, no matter where we live. And we lived in Hawaii, he'd work in California, he'd work in Texas. He has like books of business in different areas. And so he just goes wherever. It kind of just gives him freedom that he doesn't have to stay home every day and take care of special needs. It's like an excuse, right? So I've done that myself for the last 7 years anyway. And I was a single mom before I married him with my 2 kids. And he had 2 kids. We got married, tried to make a family, you know, how it goes. Anyway. So he said he was coming last night. I said, well, you can't stay at this house because you can't get along with Tylee, and I'll get you a hotel and you can come play with JJ. But he goes to school all day. I got him back into his school. His services, I met with the DDD yesterday, and they finally are getting his services back, but we're paying $125 a day to have him back at school because he's so out of his routine. He's been a nightmare on the floor, kicking stuff, hitting stuff, walls. Like, he just ripped him out of his life. So, anyway, just how he is, because he only thinks about himself. So. He says, come in to get JJ, and JJ's like, I don't want Dad, because he knows Dad took him away, so he was freaking out, right? So I didn't tell him he was even coming, like Dad's going to come take you to school or anything. So he didn't bother me last night, which I was surprised. I was expecting kind of an ambush for him to kind of like come over or be just mean and say, it's my house, I'm on the lease, I'm going to stay here kind of thing, because that's kind of his macho attitude. And so he came this morning. I was getting JJ ready.
So he got in last night, but he wasn't at the house last night.
Yeah, I didn't hear from him, except for he texted me and said, I'll be there at 7:30 to pick up JJ.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that was good, because I didn't hear from him. And then he came over in the morning, and he's like banging on the door. I'm like, oh great, here we go, you know. And I was just going to be nice. I was going to be nice as possible, and I had JJ stuff all ready for school. And so,
do you remember about what time he got there?
He said he'd be there at 7:30, but it was more like 7:40ish or 7:35. I don't know. Okay. But I remember thinking, looking at the clock, and he wasn't there at 7:30, and he's usually Mr. On time. Yes. So I was like, okay. And then JJ was like, oh, Dad. And then he was like, Mommy. mean? Like, ran to me and was like holding me. He's like, you're not taking me to school. And I was like, it's okay, Daddy can just drive you to school. It's not a big deal. You know, just trying to make it whatever. Calm. Yeah, calm. And then he was just being real smirky and real like jerky, you know, to me. And I was like ignoring him, whatever. And so he was like,
your brother lives there with you?
No.
Okay.
He had stayed with me last night because I was worried he was going to come over and cause trouble with me.
Okay.
And just wanted someone else there, like my brother there, because I trust my brother. And it's been a long story. Like, I had to go live at my brother's when he took JJ, and, you know, he's just been difficult. So, anyway.
Still with us, law enforcement and litigation expert Sunny Slaughter. Sunny, we love having you on with us, and I must just ask you this. Is there any opportunity in your mind that perhaps Lori is not quite in touch with reality? Because I'm listening to specific words she is saying during her interview, and she'll be like, oh, and anyways, whatever. And then she describes, you know, this relationship. She says, oh, he, Charles Vallow, was smirky with me. I start to feel like, does she really understand the severity of what's going on and the fact he's dead and reality?
So see, that's what I was saying. You know, when she starts out, she seems together, but she kind of trails off if you listen as she goes on. And I think the jury will see that with her. And you know, as she's representing herself, if someone says something contrary to what, you know, she says or what she believes, I just don't think she is going to do this really well. And she's not taking, I mean, he was literally murdered. It's not like he got hurt. He was murdered. And she's just kind of, matter of fact, well, he kind of made me mad. Those don't play well, I think, in front of a jury that's focused on the death of someone.
Yeah, I want to listen back to the judge in this case. So fast forward from what we're listening to in terms of this point in time in 2019, but this month we saw her in court and being told about whether or not she wanted to go forward with representing herself. Let's go back.
An attorney can be of great value and assistance in criminal cases. There are serious disadvantages and dangers to representing yourself. Can you just tell me a little bit why you want to represent yourself?
Yes, Your Honor. For the past 5 years that I've been incarcerated, I have taken upon myself to study case law and criminal rules of procedure in the state of Idaho and Arizona, as well as federally. Prior to that, for the last 10 years, prior to my incarceration, I did study procedure in family law, and I have real trial experience. I have participated in 3 different full trials from beginning to end.
You understand that if you represent yourself, you'll have the sole responsibility for, among other things, asserting legal defenses, interviewing witnesses, doing investigation, doing legal research, filing and arguing motions, examining and cross-examining witnesses, giving an opening statement and a final argument to the jury. Do you understand all that?
Yes, Your Honor, and I'm very prepared.
All right. Do you also understand that you'd be held to the same standard as an attorney regarding the presentation of your case? This would include knowledge of courtroom procedure, applicable case law, rules of evidence, and rules of procedure?
Yes.
All right.
Sunny, she says she's been studying. She has been through full trials because she's been on trial for murder and has been convicted. Your thoughts on her intelligence level? I mean, she is not, I get that she may be out of touch with reality, but the bar is very low for competence inside of a courtroom.
Exactly, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think she's very intelligent. I mean, she's done a lot of things while she was on the outside, in addition to having multiple relationships. But she's not ignorant. I think she is very manipulative. Now, let me just add this. I also think this is an opportunity for her to get some of the attention that she has not had over these years. I think she misses that and craves that in a very unique way. Being on trial will be different because this time she is able to give herself and show herself and who she is. So I think this is going to play in to her representation of herself. She wants that attention.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in that regard, Sonny. As a law enforcement expert, let's pivot and look at the actual person conducting the interview. Law enforcement interviewing her. Clearly, they got her trust, they got her comfortable. How do you think they're doing in this interview?
Well, actually, I did not like that too much. I think the interviewer was too affirmative and too affirming. She kind of nodded and she kind of went along with things that what she was saying. Yes, there's a certain part of that needs to happen, but I think she was too much into it and she should have let her talk, but she should have given her structured questions to get some of the answers more quickly and that she could delve into it more, and I don't think that she did that very well. But, and I was saying that to myself, I really don't like this interview. I don't like this particular style of interview.
Yeah, and Lori certainly seems to have control of the interview. Coming up next, yes, Lori Vallow tells the detective her husband Charles would, quote, go nuts and physically fight her kids. More of her police interview after the break. Stay with us.
.com.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for being with us as we look ahead to Lori Vallow Daybell's upcoming murder trial. And we're beginning with her interview in Arizona with the Chandler Police Department.
Vallow is currently awaiting trial for the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
Now, in this portion that we're going to look at, in this interview, she tells police that she discovered Charles had been texting her other brother and how Charles could get physically abusive. Take a look.
So I got JJ's stuff ready, and he was like, well, and he's like this about timing. He's like, I'm leaving in 20 minutes because it's like 15 minutes to the school and like you can't get there early. They don't open the gates until 8:20 or something like that. And I said, well, why don't you just go now? I don't want him in the house. I'm like, why don't you just go now and take him to Burger King because that's what he likes for breakfast. And he's very particular about food. Like, he wanted chicken fries for breakfast and a Sprite. Like, and I just give him what he wants because if you don't give him what he wants, then it's like on the floor screaming, dragging him in to school. Like, and he's big and he's heavy and it's hard for me to handle. But anyway, so I said, just go. And so he said, okay. So I gave him a backpack. He got in the car. This is his MO, right? He always leaves something in the house and comes back. He never leaves the first time. I always expect my husband to come back into the house, right? So I guess he had left his phone on the counter.
So he initially left with the backpack and with JJ?
And so he put them in the car, in the driveway, and then he came back in, right? So I kissed JJ goodbye. He came back in, and his phone was on the counter, and I had his phone. And he was like, give me my phone. And I was like, why don't you show me your text that you've been texting, blah, 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 you know, whatever. Because he's like, acting really weird, like he's plotting something against me. Like, I'm like, why are you even here? Like, what did you come here for? You know, he's been talking to my other brother, and my brother came into town at the same time last night, and I haven't talked to my brother in a while, my other brother, and I was like, and so he was texting him on the phone when he first got to my house, and I'm like, why are you texting Adam? Like, do you even talk to him? Like, my other brother. And, you know, he's been telling me all these texts, like, you're going down, blah, 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 blah. He's blaming me for our marriage breaking up and my niece getting divorced and my friend getting divorced. He said, I'm a destroyer of families because I want everybody to get divorced. I'm like, what would my motivation be for people getting divorced? So I could babysit the kids more? Like, why would I have any control over what people do?
Yeah.
So it's just very odd. But anyway, he goes nuts. He's gone nuts on us a lot of times. Tylee and I have had to leave with JJ over the years probably 5 times and just stay in a hotel for 2 days because he goes nuts. Like, you don't know what's going to set him off. Like, whatever. And she's mad at me for always, like, going back. But we had JJ and he's special needs and it's really hard. Like, it's even hard to take care of it by yourself.
So when you say he goes nuts, that can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
So goes nuts like yelling and screaming.
Yeah,
goes
yelling
nuts
and screaming.
Like breaking
like,
things.
Yes.
Goes nuts like physical violence.
He's never really, besides like grabbing us and pushing us, but not like punching us or something. But with Tylee, he has gotten physical. Before, and with my grown son.
Like physical how?
Like got into a physical fist fight with my son when he was 16.
Okay.
And he came after Tylee. 2 times in Hawaii.
Okay.
And like went like he was going to hit her, but then I got in between them. Right.
How old was she when that happened?
Probably 13 and 14.
Okay. So this morning he comes back in and...
He comes back in, I wouldn't give him his phone. He was screaming at me to give him his phone. He was very worried about whatever was on his text that he did not want me to see. And so I was just holding it there, and he was screaming at me. And I was kind of walking towards around the house with it, so he couldn't get it. He's like reaching for it and stuff like that. And so Tylee came out of her room upset, and she had a bat, and she told him to leave her mother alone, like, right? So she was really whatever, and he's screaming at her, "Don't you hit me with that bat," blah, blah, blah.
So we're watching this, and let's bring back in our guest who is standing by, law enforcement and litigation expert Sonny Slaughter. Sonny, we're listening to Lori Vallow give what sounds to be someone who is battered, someone who is scared of her husband, her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. And, you know, we're going to have to learn more details. We didn't hear these details in the Idaho trial because Arizona was off limits. The Charles Vallow case was off limits. Those jurors couldn't even know about Charles Vallow's death. But I'm wondering, because Tylee is there in the police station. She is the one who could corroborate her mother's story, and there are some things that she does corroborate. If Lori Vallow at trial can prove any of these claims that she's making right now to the police, if she can prove that in a court of law, do you think that muddies the water at all as to her culpability for Charles's death?
Oh, I think any domestic violence claim might muddy the culpability for her if she has the right demeanor. I think the interviewer is not asking the questions that actually target what happened leading up to his murder. And where were you? What does any of this have to do with the actual murder if she is not the murderer? So, like, how are we getting here? I think that's what we get confused about. But I think any claim of domestic violence, and particularly when a woman makes it against a man, it always changes the dynamics of what people think might be okay with their actions and behaviors. And I think that's problematic because gender plays a significant role in how people see victims of violence.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but we have to remember there's another victim, the attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. And I want to listen a little bit to what he had to say so that, Sonny, we can talk about how that might come into play in this trial. Let's listen together.
Did there something occur at the beginning of October of 2019 that affected that situation?
Yeah.
What?
October 2nd, someone parked in front of my house and shot at me. After my shooting, I started to have my beliefs about who I thought did it, and I got concerned about the situation. And so I started thinking back to previous stuff that had happened. And I remembered that in these groups there were people who I didn't know, but I remember there was a bunch of emails Charles had sent me. So I went through and reread those.
Okay. And did you see any names in the emails that you were looking at? When you say those groups, you're talking the groups of people that your wife was meeting in these firesides?
Yeah. She was meeting a bunch of people that didn't necessarily said they were members of the church, but didn't have any necessary connection to the church. And in that process, some of them would, write books or do things, and she would get into some of this stuff. And I remember distinctly inside of these groups, there was emails that were being sent with a group of them. And so I just went back to look at the emails Charles had sent me from there. And most of them came from Chad Daybell.
All right, Sonny, so even if there's some allegations by Lori of domestic violence, you now have not only Charles, but also Brandon talking about some of her religious beliefs and what she's doing. I think lending to that, they're both basically saying she's the trouble.
Exactly. Even though she may not have pulled the trigger on Charles, did she pull the trigger in other ways with her behaviors? And inciting domestic violence. And you now have 2 victims, 1 deceased, 1 still alive who can testify that she was problematic in the things that she was doing and saving. So I think this is what is going to be a situation that she is going to have to unpack as the attorney representing herself, and how is she going to explain this type of behavior.
You said it. There's going to be a victim inside of this courtroom testifying with Brandon Boudreaux. Unfortunately, Charles Vallow not able to speak on his own behalf, but we have the body camera footage from him, and Brandon will be a powerful witness.
Agree.
Yes.
And we're going to take a break now, but we will hear from Tylee Ryan during her interview with police in the next hour. But after this break, we're going to bring you a look back at this year, the 10 most controversial defendants of 2024 who didn't make the list and why. Stay with us here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Vallow Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
We will not stop fighting. We have no quit.
Sean Diddy Combs arrested on a federal indictment.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon. Only on Court TV.
This year was an exciting one. More people watch Court TV than ever before. And that was without a mega trial like Alec Murdaugh or Johnny Depp.
And this morning, we're looking back at the top 10 most controversial defendants of 2024. Now, everyone on this list went to trial this year, and for one reason or another, our audience was talking. Take a look.
She knows exactly where the camera is. She comes, she's got the gun hidden behind her. She slides down into the chair, and you hear her put it down on the bar stool. You can hear it whenever you get back to the jury room. You'll be able to hear it.
Slapping Anna.
I would never do that in public. I never did that.
Show me. What you just said, I've never seen that in the discovery. I've been incarcerated 3 years. You never showed that to my team. Where did you get that?
This treadmill video, which was recovered by the prosecutor's office, speaks for itself. Everything that you need and want to know is captured on this video.
I am not crazy. I am not trying to avoid responsibility. I'm not the kind of person who could brutally murder another man, do it with apparent experience and training, and then go to the gym, and then go pick up my children. I can't imagine being that type of person.
In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court...
I understand she's doing her job. I'm not mad at her for that, but I know that I'm not a bad person, and I'm thinking, like, even she knows that, but I'm sitting here like she's doing her job, you know? And I believe that you all know that I'm not a bad person. I'm not an evil person.
Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father. He took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard!
You will hear that there was one and only one person who called the police that day to identify their kid as a suspected shooter. It was James Trumbull.
Now looking back, do you think, oh my gosh, he had mental issues? No.
You don't deny that in April of 2021, you described your son as being depressed.
I didn't describe him as being depressed. I noticed that he was acting depressed.
You used the word depressed.
Yes, he was acting sad. He was acting depressed.
Were you in fear?
Always.
If he would have gotten out of the suitcase, what would he have done to you?
Like he used to tell me, he probably would have made me unrecognizable, or I would have lost my life.
family. Have some respect. A man has died.
How have you been holding up since the mistrial?
Always strong, always. I will not be broken. They will not break me.
Your message for all the supporters out here.
Thank you as always. Thank you as always.
I can't believe all of those cases happened this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we were just talking about, well, we don't have a Johnny Depp, but you hear about all these trials, and it's like, but we have a lot of big trials that happened this year. Still with us, Sonny Slaughter. Sonny, let me ask you, and I have to point out, I noted a lot of these defendants did testify on their own behalf. They don't have to, they chose to. But do you think we got it right with the top 10? Are these the ones that stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you got it right for me with the top one. And I think that's Karen Reed. I think all of these cases, I was writing them down. I was like, whoa, we really had a wild year. But Karen Reed in particular, from a law enforcement standpoint, you know, none of these cases get to prosecution until they actually get through law enforcement investigative process. I think the Karen Reed case is going to be a case to watch in 2025 because the investigative process was so flawed and has been so tainted that this case will decide whether the people of Massachusetts have any confidence and faith in the law enforcement that they have there, in the entire process, and in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, it's going to be a different trial.
Oh, agreed.
Because of the dismissal of Michael Proctor no longer being the lead investigator on this case and all of the controversy that has surrounded things from behind the scenes with the investigation. To your point, Sonny, I do want to bring up that our viewers, because that's what we culled to get this information to determine this top 10 list, we did have some of our viewers say that they believe that convicted killer Wade Wilson from the Strangled Women murder trial in Florida should have made the list here. Definitely controversial, not only from his appearance, Sonny, but the way that he did these murders with zero type of connection, it seemed, to some of the women that he harassed and terrorized, and no remorse that we saw from him even at his sentencing. Do you agree that he should have been on this list? And is there anyone that you think we missed, someone that stood out to you this year?
Well, he definitely should have been added to the list. I think you all got it right. I just think there were so many cases, so many trials, and Sarah Boone, another one, I mean, just horrific. I just thank Court TV for the opportunity to be a part of all of the crime, murder, and mayhem that we have seen across the country this year. I think there are a lot of cases. The courties have been watching, they have been involved and engaged, and I think 2025 is going to be a year of very unfolding trials and cases from 2024. But as always, Court TV got it right. Of course, we could have added more. We could have had a top 20s list and still not had enough, particularly with the number of women who murdered their children out of their age. All of those things played a huge role in what we have seen play out across the nation when it comes to crime.
And Sonny, you and I have talked about children, and I was amazed at the number of, and I was counting, we've got 5 involving kids in some capacity, which is crazy. But speaking of the no remorse that you mentioned with Wade Wilson, quickly, I see remorse not offered by others in this, and is that common in your mind? We have Sarah Boone, we have James and Jennifer Crumbly. You didn't really see them break down and seem remorseful. Melody Ferris, you never really saw a display of remorseful emotion. I could go on with our list. Robert Tellis, I just feel like remorse is not something that's been prominent in the top 10.
I agree. That has not been prominent. It has not been anything. The lack of humanity, I think, has shown in what has been those who have been convicted, what they have said afterwards. There has been a lack of humanity, a staunch, focus on their beliefs that they are innocent, even though the evidence says otherwise.
Yeah, Sonny Slaughter, thank you as always for joining us this hour, and a Happy New Year to you.
Coming up,
Happy
we
New
do
Year to
want
you.
to get to our break, and then we're going to look back more at the tension in the Vallow home. It takes a deadly turn in the Arizona case. We've been watching the police interview play out where Lori Vallow is telling police. And also, we're hearing from her daughter, Tylee, before she went missing, them telling the detectives about the moments leading up to the fatal shooting of Charles Vallow. Stay with us. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Julia Janae. Thank you for following along with us this morning as we take a look at Arizona. Looking ahead to Lori Vallow Daybell's upcoming trial, she stands accused of murdering her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and attempting to murder her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
Lori is already serving life in prison for the murders of her two children, Tylee and JJ, and for the murder of her fourth husband's first wife, Tammy Daybell. But prior to that, police interviewed Lori and her daughter Tylee about the 2019 incident when Charles Vallow was killed by Alex Cox, her brother, who claimed it was in self-defense.
Right, and at that time he was released to go free before all of the other deaths in this family. Let's get to Tylee Ryan's interview with police in just a moment, but we are going to revisit the murder charges against her mother in Arizona for the death of Charles Vallow. Here's Court TV anchor Michael Ayala with the background.
911, where is your emergency?
July 11th, 2019, Chandler, Arizona. Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, calls 911 to report a shooting.
What's the emergency there? I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
Cox tells first responders that Lori's estranged husband, Charles, had shown up at her house and they had gotten into a fight.
I turned around and he hit me in the back of the head with a bat. So I went to my room and got my gun. I would carry it.
Alex shot Charles Vallow and he died at the scene.
He came at me with the bat again after he'd already hit me in the head, so I shot him to stop him.
Lori spoke with police after Charles's death.
I didn't see the shot, it hurt, and then I came back around and I saw that he was on the ground. Okay. And was freaking out.
Yeah. Lori and Charles had been married for 14 years and were raising her teenage daughter Tylee and their adopted son JJ together. But they had separated in early 2019 after Lori began telling Charles she was married to a Mormon angel named Moroni.
She's had kind of a drug kidney. She thinks she's married to Moroni in the past.
Charles also told police that Lori had threatened to kill him.
She's had a break. Says, I'm Nick Snyder. I've taken over Charles's body. And Charles has been killed. I'm going to kill you. You're going to be murdered today or tomorrow.
But investigators say the reality was that Lori had begun an affair with Chad Daybell, a married Mormon writer who lived in Idaho. She was planning a new life with him. Prosecutors say she wanted to cash in on $1 million life insurance policy on Charles. 5 months after Charles's death, JJ and Tylee were missing. Chad's wife Tammy was dead, and Chad and Lori were married.
Did you do something to your children? Are your children still alive?
Lori Vallow Daybell is now a convicted murderer, serving life without parole in Idaho for the deaths of Tammy Daybell, Tylee, and JJ.
I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world.
She's also facing criminal charges in Arizona for the 2019 death of Charles Vallow. She's accused of conspiring with her deceased brother Alex and has been extradited back to stand trial.
Maricopa County Sheriff's Office deputies booked Lori Vallow into our ITR facility. 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of premeditated first-degree murder. She was extradited from Pocatello, Idaho, where she was already in their Department of Corrections there in custody at one of the prisons.
Lori has pleaded not guilty, but if convicted, she could get another life sentence in prison.
Now, the interview that we're about to watch together was conducted just months before Tylee and her brother JJ vanished, and it is of Tylee, in her words, describing to the police the moments leading up to the fatal shooting of her stepfather, Charles Vallow.
So I know this is going to kind of sound like kind of a silly question because it's super broad. but can you basically tell me what happened today? And you can start at whatever place makes sense for you to kind of start and explain. And I'll probably kind of ask you questions as we go a little bit.
Okay. So I woke up probably around like 7:50, I want to say, because I heard yelling from like right outside my door. And I don't even know where, but I immediately like jumped up, and I have a baseball bat because when I was living at my uncle's by myself, I just wanted something to like feel safer, and I'm not old enough to get like pepper spray or anything, so I was like, okay, I'll get a baseball bat. So I have that.
So your bedroom, you said that right outside your bedroom door, and I didn't go in the house, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. So what is your bedroom door open to?
My bedroom door open, so the room that my uncle was staying in, the room that's kind of like the guest room, if my room's right here, that's right there.
Okay.
And then my little brother's room, and then kitchen's kind of back here, so it's like a little hallway, and then right here is kind of where everything happened.
Okay.
Like the big, you walk in and...
Like big great room, kind of living room?
Yeah, right now it just has mirrors up because my mom wanted a dance room.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of unconventional, but...
Hey, whatever makes you happy. It's your guys' house, so...
Right. So, yeah, I immediately just jumped up, and I grabbed my baseball bat, and I opened the door, and it was my stepdad, you know, outside the doorway, and then my uncle kind of in the doorway, and then I could hear my mom behind him, and he was just screaming at both of them, like, I don't even know what he was saying, because honestly I was just too, like wired, I guess. So I told him to take a few steps back. I was like, you're too close, you need to step back, and he was like, don't tell me what to do, and I just kind of just stood there, and then my uncle kind of moved out of the way, and then my mom kind of went past him and into like the big room where everything happened, and so I walked with them, and then
So they were more in the hallway?
Yeah, they were at like the end of the hallway basically, and so my mom walked all the way around, and he kind of followed them, and I just kind of stood. My uncle was like right here, and then my stepdad right here, and then me and my mom were kind of right here. And I didn't do anything with the baseball bat, I kind of just held it there, and he was getting really close to my mom, so I kind of stuck it out like between them, and they were both just yelling, and he was like, if you hit me with that baseball bat, you're gonna go to jail, and I just kind of stood there with the baseball bat, and I didn't really say anything.
When you said they were yelling, who was yelling?
It was mostly my stepdad.
Okay.
Well, he was really the only one like yelling. My mom was kind of like responding, but I honestly couldn't tell you what they were saying. It was kind of just like all jumbled up in my head. And so I just kind of stuck the baseball bat out there, and then he just grabbed it and tried to take it. So I held on to the end, and then eventually I fell, and he kind of took it into his hands like he was going to do something with it, and that's when...
So when you fell, he ended up with the bat.
All right, let's welcome our guest for this hour. Joining us, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Jack Rice. Jack, of course, we're both so happy to have you with us today, and a happy New Year week to you. Let's talk about Tylee. It is always hard to watch an interview of someone who not only is no longer alive, but we know in this case was murdered by her own mother. And knowing that, listening to her description, all I can think, Jack, is she doesn't seem that pulsed by the chaos in which she lives, because she's describing this fight, this yelling between her own uncle and stepfather, and she just gets a bat and goes out to see what's going on.
Yeah, right. Your Honor, I agree completely. When we listened to her, I think what hit me first was all I could contemplate was listening about the cadaver dogs, and when they finally are digging down and they find her body, and here she is on film. As we sit here and watch her, it's hard to sort of reconcile those two spaces. And yet, you're right. Let's listen to the chaos that seems to be commonplace. She was expecting this, the idea that she's not old enough for pepper spray, excuse me, but she's old enough to have a bat, and a bat makes sense. Now let's think about that leap just to begin with. And it really says something about the volatility of that home and what that potentially could mean. A really terrible, terrible circumstance for this young girl before it gets even worse.
Absolutely. And you can hear in her voice, Jack, that loyalty she has to her mother. We talked about it in the last hour, but in listening to her, and we'll get to more of what she told police, but she corroborates essentially her mother's story. What do you think the credibility level of a child, she's a teenager, is going to be to a jury? Because no doubt, I don't know if Lori Vallow representing herself is going to lean into this in the way that's going to be compelling, but if she does get counsel again, they're going to use this to show, look, this is a very honest opinion, unbiased opinion of what happened, and she said that it was self-defense.
Julie, it's a magnificent question, because it seems to me that Lori has the potential to go one of two ways. If I'm Lori's counsel in a case like this, my response is I have an independent witness that establishes, proves, if you will, that what I was saying, how I described what happened, actually happened. And that has real force. But guess what? Lori could go a completely different direction. She could become, if she's decided, and apparently she has, to waive counsel and to try this case herself, to become Apostle Lori. And that what her job now is not to save herself from conviction, but to convince this jury, to convince this judge, no, to convince the world that her worldview, her God, her Chad, her apostle, her leader is what this is all about in the first place. I just don't know which direction she's going to go yet.
Yeah, you're right. We don't know, but it is true. When you hear Tylee describing what appears to be self-defense, I want to listen together because we also have Alex Cox. Now, he's now deceased, but no foul play is suspected. No reasons other than natural causes was reported. And Alex Cox also claims self-defense. Let's listen together.
I'm trying to calm the situation. Okay. I'm going to drop your bat, and then he's you and whatever coming at me in.
Did you ever tell him to leave, or did you say drop the bat, or?
First I just said drop the bat. Okay.
And then did you say anything else after that?
I didn't have time.
Okay. So he came after you with the bat.
Yeah.
He's kind of holding it in his hand.
I got his right hand.
Okay. You fire a couple times.
Yep.
And then you go to the kitchen.
All right, so listening to that, Jack, I think Lori has a pretty good defense argument to be made that she didn't have when it came to the conviction for the murder of her two children.
Not just Tylee. We now have Cox himself. So now we have two people. But guess what? We actually have to go further than that, because what the state would have to do is they would have to convince a jury to ignore both of them and then actually prove that she was involved and drove it or was a part of that conspiracy. So it's not just what it is that Cox said, because you have lots of evidence that shows the other part. And it makes me think of one other issue, and we talked about this with Julia's question about the volatility, and yours too, Judge, is that the volatility within this home seemed very commonplace. Well, it's been my experience, when there's volatility on one side, there's frequently volatility on all sides. And so there's a possibility you could certainly bring in a lot of volatility on behalf of Charles. So now you have it on all sides, which is consistent with a self-defense claim that's being made here.
Charles Vallow, of course, her fourth husband. She at the time was not yet married to Chad Daybell, but was in a relationship with him behind the scenes, behind closed doors. I want to ask your opinion, Jack. You mentioned Apostle Lori, that may be who we're getting in this pro se case that she has, and her apostle, her love, her, end all be all was always Chad Daybell. Do you think that as a pro se defendant, she gets to interview him at all? I know as an inmate, she normally wouldn't get to talk to him, but does it change if he is a witness in this case?
That is magnificent. And I think all of us, and I mean this from a professional standpoint, is this is something we're all watching for. And the reason is because she does. Now, the Sixth Amendment allows people to represent themselves, but there are limitations. But one of the things that a pro se defendant gets to do, and Your Honor, you especially understands this as a judge, the judge's job is to give a defendant the right to defend themselves and to protect those constitutional rights. And so while there are limitations, you do need to give them some leeway, and that leeway allows Lori to stretch into where she wants to go. And if she decides to step into that Chad the prophet pool and to talk about being the apostle that she is, and that what this is about is something broader. And we could even see her take the steps as talking about there are the costs of what it is to be the true believer and those who are lost along the way. It depends upon the evidence that comes in. I'm talking about her own children. I'm talking about a whole series of things, because she has been very vocal about her philosophical and religious beliefs. That fits into who she is. I think one of the reasons she's trying to waive that lawyer is she wants to be able to talk about it this time.
Yeah, but she said, I've been through trials. Well, as a participant, a defendant, not as a lawyer, and lawyers know the nuances of all the things whereof you speak, expert Jack. And so I'm just, it's going to be really interesting to see how she represents herself. Stand by. Coming up next, Tylee Ryan recalls hearing a loud noise, which she later came to realize was actually a deadly gunshot. More of her police interview after the break. Stay tuned.
How are we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody. You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
This was a real-life soap opera.
And I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Cashing in today.
Welcome back. As we look ahead to Lori Vallow Daybell's upcoming murder trial in 2025, we are looking back at police interviews from right after the death of her then husband, Charles Vallow.
Lori is currently charged with Charles's murder, along with the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
Now, police interviewed Lori's daughter, Tylee, about what happened in their house the morning of the shooting. However, months after this interview was conducted, Tylee would vanish, and Lori would later be convicted of her death and her brother's murder.
Now, in this portion of the interview, Tylee recalls trying to stop Charles Vallow from hurting her uncle Alex during that fatal altercation in 2019. Let's take a listen.
I fell to the ground, and then my uncle I saw him take a step back, so my uncle, I think, grabbed him and kind of took him back so he couldn't do anything.
You saw your stepdad take a step back?
Take a step back, because he was really close to begin with, and then and so my mom said to go with JJ, and so I ran out the door, and then I kind of just stood there with my little brother. He was in the front seat of the car, and so I just kind of opened the door and just stood there, and he was trying to get out, and I was like, no, we have to stay. I have to stay in. And I was like, oh, I told him, do you want to go in the Jeep? And then he was like, no. And then I realized that my car was blocked in, so I couldn't anyways. I was like, okay, just stay here. And then eventually my mom came out, and then we left from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened inside of the house? Has your mom kind of explained it all to you?
I just kind of asked her, because I heard a noise. Which I know what it was now, but it sounded because I knew that the base of I was in there, it sounded like someone took it and hit it really hard against the floor.
Okay.
And so I was kind of Al's okay, right? Because that's my uncle. So I just wanted to make sure that my stepdad didn't do anything to my uncle and stuff. And so she was like, no, Al's fine. We're just gonna take JJ to school. And I was like, okay. So I just got in the car, and then we went to Burger King because my little brother wanted breakfast, which was chicken fries for some reason.
Okay. I do dinner for breakfast all the time.
Breakfast for dinner and dinner for breakfast.
So to kind of back up a little bit, so you had talked about your stepdad, when you put the bat out, your stepdad was coming towards your mom. Can you describe to me a little bit better kind of what was going on there? Like, is there a reason you put the bat up?
Yeah, he was walking towards my mom, and I just didn't want him to do anything, so I kind of just stuck out the bat. Like, my mom was right beside me, and he was right there, so it wasn't, like, between them.
Okay.
It was kind of just, like, I just stuck it out to be, like, keep your distance, kind of.
When you say you didn't want him to do anything, what did you think he was going to do?
Hit her.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, for the most part, been pretty, like, mundane, but there have been a few, like, violent times with him when I was really scared that he was going to hit me or hit my mom, like, just because everything was kind of crazy. Me and him have always kind of not gotten along, like, just since I was little. And so there have been a few times that we've gotten in fights and stuff like that, and so, so I'm just kind of always scared of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so that happened, and he grabbed the bat from you. So kind of tell me that again real quick.
So I kind of stuck it out, and this is when he was like, if you hit me with that baseball bat, you're going to jail, and I didn't say anything because I'm like, okay. And so I'm holding it by, like, the end of the bat, like, the place where you hold it, and so he kind of took it, and I kind of, like, lunged forward and kind of lost, like, my footing. And so my mom was like, just let go, and so, I kind of, like, slipped and I fell, kind of on, like, my side.
Okay.
Yeah, and then from that, my mom said to go to the car, so I just got up and ran out the door.
Let's bring back in criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Jack Rice. Jack, we always appreciate your expert analysis of these cases. What I'm wondering is I'm listening to Tylee, and it's unsettling to hear her speak so lovingly about Alex Cox. It seems like all of her affection is for him in this situation and not her stepfather. But he's ultimately the one that, through these murder convictions, we believe he was the hitman who killed Tylee in the end, and JJ Vallow as well. So let's say what she's saying is correct, and this is how it went down, how she perceived it. Is it possible to goad someone into a self-defense situation? And in a situation like that, who is ultimately responsible?
Well, in a case like this, she certainly is providing sufficient evidence to support a self-defense. And you even talk about these prior bad acts. You talk about this prior violence, this prior fear, the legitimate fear that one would have based upon somebody. And I'm talking about Charles here. So if we think about what it is that's being said, I think you can understand in some ways why there was a delay in prosecution. Because if we think about what's happening here, the idea is, well, the evidence seems to be consistent. But I agree, as we sit here and we listen to the words of this poor dead child, I can't help but realize the difficulty that her life must have faced. By the way, as just a slight aside, as I watched that interrogation, those rooms are called soft interrogation rooms, and they're different than the hard interrogation rooms you'll see sometimes, and we see all the time. Notice that the furniture is softer. Notice in the other chair, there is that little teddy bear. All of those are designed because you're bringing in children who are involved in violent acts. And you're dealing with police officers who are having to deal with children in violent acts. And sometimes it's forgotten when you realize those professionals, those of us who work in this system, we deal with some of the most brutal, horrifying, and violent experiences that anybody deals with outside of war zones. And we deal with them on a daily basis. And so you realize the brutality of what's going on here. And I think even about this interrogator, this police officer, who now may be watching this very video with us and thinking about, if I could have just seen something more, something else, maybe I could have saved this life. That's one more thing that you think about.
Yeah. I've never heard that description, the soft room. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that out, Jack. We do have to get to a break where we're going to talk more about this police interview. We're going to listen to more, including Tylee Ryan recalling seeing her stepfather being in, quote, pure rage during this altercation with her uncle Alex Cox. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Plan. Call now.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae.
And I'm Ashley Wilcott. Back now to Arizona, where we're looking ahead to Lori Vallow's upcoming murder trial, slated to begin in March of this next year, 2025.
Getting close to the new year. Today, we are looking back at the police interview of Vallow's daughter, Tylee Ryan. She's describing what happened the morning of July 11th, 2019, a shooting that left her stepfather, Charles Vallow, dead.
And we are picking it up now with Tylee telling the police about how angry her stepfather, Charles, was leading up to the shooting. Let's listen in.
Did you see when you fell towards your side, did you see what he did with the bat?
No, I wasn't really looking in that direction because from where I fell, the door was kind of more in my line of vision because I fell looking this way and the door was like right there, so I didn't look back.
So he was he was at a different line of sight than what you were looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point you saw him kind of take a step back, and from what you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong or not, you didn't necessarily see your uncle pulling back, but it seems like that maybe...
It seems like he wouldn't have taken a step back on his own, so it's more of an assumption than anything. I didn't see him physically take him back.
And does that make sense based on where your uncle was at that time?
Yeah, he was behind him because he wasn't on this side with me and my mom, so he was behind him.
Okay.
Because that's kind of just the order where everyone walked out.
And when that happened and then your mom told you to go, did you see what happened with your stepdad and uncle?
No.
Okay. And then once you went outside with your brother, you never came back inside?
Oh, I went to go get my mom's purse from inside so that we could have, like, her wallet and everything, but this was all happening, like I said, like, in the bigger room right here. And so I went through the garage door, and so the garage door is right here, and then there's, like, a little hallway, and then this is kind of where everything is, and then this is my mom's room. So when I went in, I kind of, like, just tuned everything out, ran to my mom's closet, ran back, so I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything.
When did you go back in and get her purse?
After my mom came out.
Okay. So after you heard that loud noise?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you heard the loud noise, was your mom outside or inside?
I'm trying to think. I think she was inside when it happened and the door opened like immediately after.
Okay. So very quickly after the door opened?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a long period of time because I remember not like thinking about it for that long, and if my mom hadn't come out immediately, I would have, been thinking about it for a lot longer than I had.
So obviously I don't know like your mom and stepdad and uncle. Like you do, I don't. So can you tell me kind of where the three of them were at kind of emotionally and how they were behaving when all this was happening?
When all this was happening or like before?
When all this was happening. So like when you came out of your room and he took the bat from you and...
Yeah, so my stepdad was like, he was like, I don't even know how to explain it. He honestly just looked like kind of a crazy person.
Okay.
Like screaming and like his face was beet red. He just looked like really mad. I remember when he took the bat from me, I saw his face for like a split second and I honestly like, it didn't even look like him. He just looked like pure like rage. Like he was just seeing red. So I haven't really seen him like all the way like that before. That's like the craziest I've ever seen him. And then my uncle was kind of calm, like not super calm. Obviously it was like a stressful situation, but he's like, I don't know, he was kind of just standing there in the doorway, kind of just being protective of my mom, but he wasn't yelling or really saying anything.
Okay.
And my mom was just he was yelling and my mom was kind of just like talking.
Okay.
Still with us, criminal defense attorney Jack Rice. Jack, I still think we could view this interrogation favorable to the defense in claiming it was self-defense by Alex, and therefore Lori would not be convicted if that were believed. Let me ask you this then, just basic trial skills. Number one, how do you get a video like this in when the person being interviewed is now deceased? And number two, will Lori Vallow know how to do that as a pro se defendant? Because those are the things they don't always know or understand.
That is hugely important in a case like this. First of all, you have to establish that she is unavailable, right? And that's a big piece of this. And obviously, Tylee is unavailable, but then you're going to bite back and say, yeah, but it's because her mom killed her. And so it's horrifying to think of it that way, but we're talking about a circumstance that says she's unavailable. This is essentially the best evidence. So I'm going to cut to it and say it's the best evidence. But you really do think about sort of the trial approach to something like this, Your Honor. And as I was listening to this last chunk of this in this interview, and what came to mind, and I even wrote it down because I thought, this might be my theme. Said, and I wrote, Charles was pure rage with a bat in his hand. Now, does that sound like an innocent man who was actually the victim of a hit? Or does that sound like somebody who was willing to kill? And we had Alex, who was calm and protecting Lori. These are the words of Tylee herself. Now, you think about the idea of using a theme, and you start when you're doing opening statements, you start with the theme and you work your way through the case. Lori doesn't understand any of this. Yes, she saw her own murder trial. Guess what? I know lots of people who have seen their own trials. That does not make them good at this. I know a lot of lawyers who haven't tried very many cases who aren't good at this because they haven't done this a dozen times or 30 times or 50 times or 80 times. It took me years and years and years to get to the space where I actually thought, I actually know how to do this. And I'm talking decades before I felt like I know how to play this game. I know how to work this jury. I know how to work this judge, but it took me decades.
From everything, though, that we know about Lori Vallow, I think that's probably the narrative that's in her mind, that she knows how to work this jury, work this judge, work this criminal justice system. Who knows if we'll get the litigator Lori or we'll get the apostle Lori, as you mentioned. That's a phrase you coined and given her the moniker of. I don't know what we'll see at trial, but I want to think about the prosecution, because this is a problem for them, seeing Tylee Ryan, Alex Cox, and Lori all saying the same story. So what's going to be really important are those emails, the things from Chad Daybell, saying that he's dark and that he has this evil spirit, and the Ned Schneider. So I'm going back to my question of, even if all of the facts point to self-defense, if they had a plan beforehand that he needs to go and we need to engineer a situation where we can get away with it, would that be something that the prosecution needs to acknowledge up front, that yes, this may have looked and potentially was self-defense when you look at it from one standpoint, but from another standpoint, they planned this?
Oh, Julia, that's what you were referring to before, which was this idea of the setup, right? That you're putting somebody in a position where they are pure rage, where they are out of control, and then what you do is you use that as an excuse to kill them. And I think that's exactly what the prosecution has to do. By the way, the fact that Lori coming at this without counsel also does something else, because now the question is, are any of those emails, text messages even relevant? Because the issue isn't what happened before, but what happened in that room. And if you can't win on that issue, you might be lost anyway.
Yeah, good points. All right.